Welcome to This Explainer. Okay, so if you're stepping into the role of a startup CEO, you're about to make a decision that will quietly dictate your success or failure over the next decade. Today, we're going to walk through an absolutely critical mindset shift about how you share ownership of your company. We're leaning on some key insights from Y Combinator's Michael Seibel, mapping out exactly how you need to think about giving equity to your co-founders. Look, this isn't just about math, all right? It's about human psychology, it's about long-term endurance, and fundamentally shifting how you view your entire role as a leader.
So picture this scenario for a second. You're building a startup. You have the vision, you've done all the initial legwork, and now you're bringing on a co-founder. They look at you and they ask for 50% of the company. What do? I mean, human nature and typical business instincts, they're probably screaming at you to protect your asset. You might be thinking, I gotta negotiate them down. I have to win this transaction. It totally feels like a zero-sum game, right? You want to hoard that equity because it feels like you're giving away your own hard-earned cash. But what if I told you that winning that negotiation, like grinding your co-founder down to a smaller piece of the pie, what if that is exactly what kills your company a few years down the line?
Okay, let's dive right into this. On the one hand, we've got the rookie mistake, treating equity purely like a negotiation where you're just trying to give away as little as humanly possible. But on the flip side, we have the pro move, and that is treating equity as your primary tool for maximizing long-term motivation. Michael Seibel points out that this is exactly where most founders get it completely wrong. They literally miss the forest for the trees. They get so bogged down in the math of the current moment that they forget what that equity actually represents for the future of their entire operation. Section 1, the great equity fallacy. So the first major pitfall you're going to encounter is something Michael Seibel hears constantly from early-stage founders. They'll say things like, well, we came up with this equity split because that's what we negotiated. Now, I know that sounds totally reasonable on the surface, but guys, this is a massive red flag. Why? Because it means the CEO is fully focused on winning a transactional dispute today rather than building a lasting, highly motivated partnership for tomorrow. As a great CEO, your very first thought absolutely cannot be about how to win an equity negotiation. Instead, your main focus has to be on figuring out an equity split that will absolutely maximize the motivation of your teammates for the long haul.
Section 2, designing long-term motivation.
Let's be real for a second. The reality of building a massive, impactful startup is incredibly grueling. And your equity strategy? It needs to reflect that harsh reality. Just look at what's required here. We're talking about years and years of relentless commitment. I mean, almost every single startup is going to face times when things go horribly wrong. And here's the real trick. Oftentimes, the co-founders you're talking to right now at the very beginning of the journey, they don't quite grasp the massive time commitment they're going to have to give if the startup actually works out. So as the CEO responsible for the equity split, you have to think about what your co-founders would want, even if they aren't thinking about their own long-term interests in this exact moment. You are essentially designing the fuel that's going to keep them running through the absolute hardest times.
Section 3, your get out of jail card. Now, I know what you might be thinking. Giving away massive chunks of your company is terrifying, right? Like, what if they leave? Well, your primary mechanism of safety is a concept called vesting with a cliff. Let's just slow down and be really clear about how this actually works. Typically, when you give equity to anyone, especially a founder, you use a 4-year vesting schedule. That means they actually have to work at the company for 4 full years to get their entire equity stake. But crucially, you also include a 1-year cliff. This means if they leave or if they're fired from the company within their very first year, they get absolutely nothing, 0. And this brilliantly illustrates that 4-year journey. Year 1 is the cliff. That is your hedge. If you made a completely incorrect decision about choosing this person as your co-founder, well, this is your get out of jail free card. As long as you realize your mistake and correct it within that first year, they leave without any equity. There is absolutely no long-term harm to the capitalization table of your company. None. But once they survive year 1, their vesting just naturally continues through years 2, 3, and 4 until they are fully vested. So the crucial point you need to take away here is this. Generosity is safe. Because you have that 1-year cliff acting as your hedge, it actually benefits you, more often than not, to be more generous with the equity you give your co-founders, not less. You're completely insulated from the worst-case scenario. Think about it. If they turn out to be a total disaster, you just fire them before the cliff and you lose nothing. But if they turn out to be incredible, that generous equity is going to create the deep, long-term motivation they need to stick with the startup when things get incredibly difficult.
Section 4, creating true company owners.
Okay, so now that we know your downside is protected by the cliff, what does generous equity actually buy you? Well, as a CEO, the very last thing you want to create is a situation where you have to act like a middle manager, constantly trying to motivate your co-founders every single day. You want their equity stake in this company to be the absolute engine that drives them. A generous equity grant turns an employee into a true owner. And what does a true owner do? They're the ones who wake up in the middle of the night thinking about solutions. They're the ones voluntarily working on the weekends. They work late into the night. They naturally recruit their absolute smartest friends to join the mission. They feel like the company is theirs because, well, it is.
Now, you might be sitting there asking for an exact formula. And Michael Seibel notes that in the past, he's advocated that most companies should really just have equal equity splits. All things considered, 50-50 is a really nice, easy rule of thumb. It sets a baseline of complete equality and shared burden. But, he also admits it kind of can't always be applied perfectly in every single situation. Honestly, the exact mathematical breakdown is way less important than achieving the phenomenon we just talked about. Whatever the split is, it absolutely must hit that threshold where the co-founder feels like a pure, undeniable owner of the business. If you hit that phenomenon, your company becomes infinitely more viable.
Section 5. The ultimate co-founder test. All right, this is where you really have to look in the mirror and be incredibly honest with yourself. If you're sitting there right now looking at your potential co-founder and you genuinely don't feel like they are worth a generous equity grant, if you aren't really interested in their future motivation, and you don't actually think you're going to need them in the long term, why on earth are you making them a co-founder at all? Just let that sting for a second. You need to seriously reconsider who is on your team if you do not firmly believe they're worth a generous piece of the company. It is literally the ultimate litmus test for whether you have the right partner for the grueling decade ahead.
That mindset shift, moving from hoarding equity in a zero-sum negotiation to freely giving it to secure a highly motivated long-term partner, that is exactly what separates rookie founders from visionary CEOs. Look, if you found this breakdown valuable and you want to keep mastering the mechanics of building great companies, hit that subscribe button right now. We've got plenty more structured startup explainers coming your way to help you navigate the hardest parts of being a founder. Thank you so much for joining me, and I'll see you in the next explainer.